Where does that health professional fit into your life?
Well, I miss it a lot, actually, and especially the EMT part, because that was just what I needed to feel that I was significant. You get a call 3 o'clock in the morning, it's 20 degrees below zero outside, somebody's having a heart attack, and you're trying to do something about it, although where I was working, you couldn't do a lot about it because you had a long ambulance trip in which they would die. But still, the idea of service is, I think, wonderfully essentialized in medical care. My daughter is an ER doc now, so she's doing it for me. And in fact, she provided a lot of information, ER stuff, for Golem's song.
Sure, sure. Where your protagonist is an ER nurse.
Right. Like me.
And before we get to your writing, which we will get to, but there are too many interesting things, another iteration in your life, you become a Unitarian minister. Why did you do that?
I was at the time the director of the Peace and Justice Center, and we were doing a leafleting at General Electric, which at the time was making Gatling guns for El Salvador to kill people in Central America, you know. And we were down there early in the morning, and I'm handing a leaflet out to one of the workers, and he says, well, I know this stuff. I know what we're doing. You don't have to tell me. I said, so why are you doing it? He says, hey, man, it's a good job. And I realized that as the director of the Peace and Justice Center, I had no idea how to answer that question. So I thought, I better go back to school and learn the answer to that question. So what can you study? Plus, what would enable me to use all the things that I can do to be a teacher, to be a performer, to be a theater person, to be, you know, a scholar, et cetera, et cetera. And it all came in, you know, in this box called, maybe you should be a Unitarian minister. I'd never been in a church, right?
But you applied as a Jewish, Buddhist, atheist, something like that?
I don't care. And it was, in fact, great. Seminary was fabulous. Best institutional experience of my life, and the people were wonderful. And then I got in trouble in the congregations. I got essentially, well, not rehired, I think of it as fired, for being too political in both congregations that I went to. And
well, it seemed that, you know, in your book, certainly you grapple with the nature of morality and truth and the impact of value systems on our psyche. Did writing then turn out to be a better,
way better
endeavor for the scholar in you, the writer, the thinker, the grappling with these big issues?
Absolutely, it's much, much better. I don't have to do coffee hour, you know.
What people think. So you didn't take up writing until you're 58 years old, nearly a decade ago. What got you started? Who got you started?
What got me started is this current book, which is the third book, and that got me started because of the phone call that I got from somebody who wanted me to send him a high-powered rifle with a telescopic sight because he wanted to kill black people in New York City.
This is a friend of yours from New York, so he calls you up. And
because there's going to be a war between the blacks and the Jews. And so that was a very disturbing phone conversation, and I wrote it down just for I don't know why. But then I had the experience, this kind of experience of writers, that you have this thing in front of you on the screen, and you have these fingers, and, you know, and all of a sudden they start doing other things, right? And this starts to grow, and it grew into a novel, which nobody wanted to buy, right? But when I started writing people about that I was also beginning to work on insect dreams, they liked that idea, and that's what got sold. That's what found me my public editor.
Right.
And
so it became the third published, even though it was the first one you wrote. The first one that was published was Insect Dreams.
Right.
Yeah. You know, let's before we leave Golem's song, since we're on it, just tell us the story of the golem and how over the years it seemed that since you wrote the book, which was in the late 90s, you've noticed golemism at work in the world today.
Well, the Golem original story is about a upcoming, looked like a serious pogrom in Prague in 1583, I think it was. And the rabbi, in order to counter this coming attack on the Jewish community in Prague, went to the river, brought up a lot of clay into the attic of the synagogue, and fashioned it into this gigantic figure, right? Who then the problem comes because he then uses Kabbalistic magic and different variations of the story, but makes this into a living being, which is problematical because human beings are not supposed to turn.
It's a very Frankenstein-like story.
It's Frankenstein, yeah. It has variations on that, and it's before Frankenstein.
Right, very much so.
So then this protector of the Jewish community scares away the pogrom, yes, but then becomes, by a certain accident of miscommunication, destructive and begins to destroy everything and get out of hand. So the rabbi has to take him back upstairs and kill him. And the idea of using large-scale violence, or the potential, setting up the potential for large-scale violence in order to protect yourself, is so prevalent, it seems to me, in the world, that we really ought to think about the golem myth, because there are very interesting qualities that myth has, and especially as it's applied today, that normal political analysis doesn't take into account. For instance, there's very much in that golem story the sense both of being a victim and a Superman. Übermensch, Untermensch. Those two things together, right? Oh, they attacked us in 9/11. Oh, we're the most powerful country in the world. Oh, but we're under attack. Blah, 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 blah. The interaction of and then you use the fear of the Untermensch to soup up the power of the Übermensch. Right?
And certainly your book, there's this identification with ethnicity, whether it's African Americans or your Jewish protagonist, that leads to kind of intolerance and possible violence. And you deal with this in not only that book, but in other books as well, that kind of dangerous piece of business. And it makes me wonder, well, going back to what is Jewishness for you? It's very much part of the dialogue of this book, the monologue and dialogue of this book and your character.
Mm-hmm. Well, I grew up in an entirely Jewish neighborhood. There wasn't zero non-Jewish kid in my elementary school. I went out of the neighborhood to go to junior high school, and then all of a sudden it was the Jews versus the Italians, the kids that came up, the special progress kids that came up. And a friend of mine got stabbed. Stabbed? We don't do that. And so, I really did grow up Jewish. On the other hand, I was a red diaper baby. My parents were communists. They thought all this was superstitious nonsense. I was the only kid on the block that didn't go to Hebrew school and had no Jewish experience as theology or anything else. And so I wasn't a Jew for a long time. I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. I liked pastrami sandwiches and black cherry soda. And it was actually the conflicts between Israel and the Palestinians that made me open that door again, because as a Jew, the quotation marks came off,
Yeah,
and all of a sudden
I had to part of all your books.
Yeah, and I had to think about what that meant to be a Jew, and also somebody in Insect Dreams called me a new Jewish writer. What? But then I thought this was a critic. How critics change your life. A writer? So that too made me try to think more carefully about what this whole Judaism thing was about.
Well, one of the most remarkable, there are many great scenes in Golem Song, but you have lunch, the protagonist, not you, the protagonist has lunch with a living philosopher, Martha Nussbaum, and where you talk about ethics and Jewishness, and the character is very involved in this whole thing. How did you get permission from her, and what was her reaction?
Well, it's worse than that, Fran. It just didn't have lunch. The character wants to make out with her.
Well, yeah, there's
right?
that too.
No, but that's the problem.
Right, true.
He has
true.
all